Hello and welcome back to Pay Down Debt Solutions. My name is Jen, and on this channel, we teach a style of banking called velocity banking. We teach you how to get out of your debts much faster. I want to focus on today what goes out must come in. And I know when you read that, you're thinking, wait, Jen, isn't that backwards? What goes out must come in. Shouldn't we have what comes in be greater than what goes out? And the answer to that is yes, but I wanted to flip this on its head today because I want to talk to you guys about expenses. You see, the secret to wiping out debt is in your expenses. It's just rearranging your expenses. So right now, the expenses that you owe something, right? You owe debts. You have debts that you have to pay. And the only way you can really do anything about that is either to make more income, okay, get a side hustle, make more money, right, to handle those debts, or rearrange how those debts are structured, okay? And that's what part of velocity banking is all about. Because right now you're in the traditional banking system, you're paying for your expenses as normal, and it's taking you forever to do because you're on a schedule, something like this, right? Where it's taking you 8 years and maybe $12,000 to get out of these debts, to term that out, 5 years at $2,700, or a year and 8 months at $224, right? So you need to look at your debts and realize, due to those payments that you're making, how much the payback is going to cost you. So today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about expenses and how important it is to rearrange some things. So if you take a look and you say, okay, what goes out must come in. So how can we change what goes out just a little bit so that our income is more impactful to our financial picture? So what you spend from your debt destroyer must be replaced, obviously, right? Or we're going backwards. If it's not replaced, then we're going the other way and we're causing more debt. But if you do it correctly, right? If you do it correctly, you can actually work down your debt. So those of you out there that have been following us know that we work with lines of credit instead of loans. So when you have a line of credit and you're putting your income into that line of credit and you're running your expenses out, if you can rearrange your finances just a little bit, those expenses can actually be less, which means your income is more impactful to paying down your debt, okay? Especially using lines of credit like we do in velocity banking. So here, if we have our R-lock, which is our debt destroyer, okay, so we have an R-lock of any kind, it really doesn't matter at this point, and we are running our expenses out of it, all of them or partial, a partial, because we know that when we use credit cards, we can't use necessarily all of our debt because there are certain things we can't pay for out of a credit card, such as other loans or other credit cards, okay? So we have to be a little bit tricky about how we do things. And then income, again, it's going to be all or partial, okay? So if we have an R-lock here, and let's say it's the limit on it is $13,500, and I'm showing some expenses. I'm showing utilities at $660. I'm showing a mortgage at $1,200. I'm showing a car payment at $450, and I'm showing groceries at $1,100 a month. 11,000, that would be a lot. So $1,100 a month, which means our total in these expenses here, okay, our total expenses are $3,410, okay? So we're kind of using some numbers based on the scenario that I'm going to go over, this hypothetical for you, so you can see the power of rearranging your expenses. All right, so if we have our income here, which is our direct deposit, right? So we know what our expenses are. We know we're paying our expenses out of our R-lock, right? Our revolving line of credit. All right. And if we have a direct deposit, such as we do here, of $39.80, and that direct deposit goes all the way into that revolving line of credit, the difference between the two is what goes to work down our debt. Okay. And in this case, in the scenario the hypothetical that I came up with, there is some positive cash flow. So that can go in to work down our debt, plus whatever we have that we can consolidate a little bit to rearrange those expenses. Okay, so that's exactly what I'm talking about. Now, credit cards, again, my little star here is that credit cards as a debt destroyer means you put in part of your pay, not all of it. Again, that's because there are certain things that we cannot hold, are certain things that we have to hold out of it because we can't pay certain debts through a credit card. So I'm going to run this for you two ways. I'm going to run it for you showing you how lines of credit can change. When you change your expenses, you can put your expenses into a line of credit or some of them. And I'm going to show you what difference that makes to your overall picture and the time frame that things take, right? And the lowering of expenses that will happen naturally when you use velocity banking. So here in my situation here, I have a traditional banking situation where we're paying our bills and we're paying our debts as due on their schedule. We're paying our minimum balances and we're seeing what our payback is. Okay. So if my income here is $3,980 and my total expenses are $3,760, that means we have a cash flow of $220 and it's a positive cash flow. Okay. So here's our cash flow, positive. All right, so let's say we have a mortgage or maybe it's rent. It doesn't really matter. So mortgage or rent of $1,200 a month. And we have a car payment at $450. That means these two debts here equal $1,650, okay? Now, when I tell you guys that, if you have a credit card that you're running with Velocity Banking, these would be two expenses you cannot run through your credit card. You can run all the other expenses though, right? So these utilities, you can run through that credit card. You can run your groceries through that credit card. You can run your gas through that credit card, right? So there's all sorts of purchasing power that credit card has that you can run through it that would be in your living expenses. Okay, so that's the difference between the credit card and the line of credit, such as a personal line or a home equity line or even a business line of credit. Okay, so the first one that I'm going to run for you here is a personal line of credit as our debt destroyer. I'm showing an interest rate for the personal line at 13.5%. Now, a home equity line of credit is going to be even less than that, but I figure I'll take the higher interest rate to show you how well it works no matter what that interest rate is, okay? But we do know that lines of credit, such as a personal line and a home equity line and a business line, those are all going to be less in interest than, per se, a credit card for the most part, okay? It's almost never the other way, but there are times when the credit card could be lower, okay? Then I'm going to show you using the Chase card as our debt destroyer and what that looks like, okay? So cash flow again, 220, mortgage, 1,200, car, 450. That means we have 1,650 as our total for those debts there. Now we come down to our credit card debt, okay? So I'm showing 3 credit cards here. I've got a Chase card and I have an $8,000 balance and it's a $200 payback at 27%. That means it's going to take in the traditional banking system 8 years and 8 months, and I'm going to owe $12,696 in just interest. That's not my total payback. That's just my interest. Okay. So for $8,000 borrowed, I'm going to owe $12,696. All right. Now, if I have Discover here, and Discover is for $3,210, that's the balance on it. It's at the payment is $100. It's at a 28% interest rate. It'll take me 5 years to pay that back, and I'm going to pay back interest of $2,783 on top of what I've borrowed, which is $32.10. Okay, so of course it's going to take me 5 years to finish that. It's just right. I mean, running it through the traditional banking system, running at these minimums here, that's what it's going to take me. All right, if I have a Gap card, and we all know store cards have high interest rates. So let's say I have $755 on that. It's a $50 payment a month for that. At 32%, it's going to take me a year and 8 months, and I'm going to owe $224. So $224 on $755. Okay, at the end of the day, looking at the interest, that's not too bad. But when you consider the fact that it's at 32%, that's kind of terrible when you think about it, right? All right, so what do we do and how do we make things different for ourselves? If we can't get another job, if we have income that is pretty set and there's no way to make more money, how can we change our expenses then to help us out and to give us more power to work down our debt? Well, you can do a couple different things. Now, if we have a PLOC here, like the personal line of credit, and let's say our limit is 13,500, okay, 13,500. That means that we could essentially take all of these cards here, right? Because our balance is 11,965. We could take them all and put them into that personal line of credit at 13.5%. So what have we done? Well, we've eliminated 27%, 28%, and 32%, and basically halved it, right? So we did, well, and in some cases better than that. So because we're at 13.5%, even though that sounds like a high interest rate, it's a heck of a lot lower than these. So we could rearrange our expenses, throw them inside that line of credit, and work down our debt. All right, Jen, so what do you mean by working down your debt? Well, this is what I mean. Remember, when we put our income into a line of credit and we run all of our expenses out, what are we doing to that line of credit? Well, knowing that lines of credit are figured on that average daily balance, right? So every day, whatever that balance is for that card, that is what they figure your interest on. And then they take an average for that statement period, okay? So when you put all of your income in and significantly drop that line of credit, even if it's for just a minute or a day, right? That's still averaging out lower, right? So we're going to pay lower interest over time than we would by doing it the traditional way, putting in our little itty bitty payment every month. That doesn't help drop our interest rate quickly, but this does. Okay, so this does. So here's what we do then. Now, I can put, when I'm working with lines of credit, usually I can put my entire income into that baby. And why can I do that? Because when I'm putting my entire income into that line of credit, it's connected to my checking account. So I can do this two ways. I can either have it set to automatically draft into my checking to cover any bills that come out of my checking. Okay, that would be an automatic draft like overdraft protection. Okay, so it can be set that way. Just check with your bank, make sure they don't charge you for that. Or it can be connected, my line of credit could be connected to my checking account. So I move money as needed into the checking account and I pay for whatever I'm going to do out of that checking account. Now, some of you are getting pretty tricky now, learning how to do this. And instead of running everything through your credit card like you probably are today, you say, okay, well, I'm going to connect that line of credit to my account, which is fine, but I'm actually going to use my credit card that I have sitting over here for all of my expenses, because maybe that's a points card. And maybe you've learned that you can get a boatload of points by using that card for every expense that you can. So then what happens is when that credit card is due each month, money sweeps from that line of credit, or you move it manually into your checking account and you pay it right out of that checking account. You pay that card off, right? So you're paying that card off every month. You're gathering the points on it, and you're still working down your debt in the exact same way. So that is one of the wonderful things about using lines of credit this way, okay? So you can still use credit cards and you can still collect points on credit cards and run it through your checking account to be paid that way, okay? So you just have to be tricky and you have to think outside the box a little bit about how you can do this. And on top of the interest savings that you're doing from using that line of credit, you're actually getting points on your card now too, which then causes more savings for you down the road. Okay, I digress, right? All right. So here we have our debts. We know that we've got our payments of $200, $150. So $350 is our total. So if I have taken all of these debts now and put them inside my personal line of credit, as you can see I've done here, that means that I can take my entire income and make a payment of my entire income onto that line of credit, okay? So what that means is it drops my balance immediately to $7,985. And then I have expenses that come out, right? I have my expenses. But my expenses here are $34.10 instead of $37.60. So how did we get this? How did we get that? Remember, they were $34.10 over here? Well, that's because what's not showing here are the debts here from our credit cards, right? So the debts from the credit card are not showing over here, but we still have them. They are in our expenses. So what we do then is, because we've consolidated these into that line of credit, we no longer owe the 200, the 100, or the 50, right? So this 350 comes back to me as cash flow, okay? And it gets added essentially to my cash flow. But I do have interest, okay? And I do have interest, and you can see that I have interest here. And in this case, it starts out at 112. Now, so I have all of this, the 350, the 220, but I still have to pay my interest. Now, some of you smarties out there are thinking, yeah, that's great, Jen, but you still have a payment on that line of credit. So you got to add that in, right? Nope. And here's why. Because I have already made my payment of my income into that line of credit. So now I don't owe anything, right? Because I've already made a payment. And we all know that that income is way more than that payment is ever going to be, okay? A lot of times lines of credit run on interest only. Yes, you'll never pay them down or pay them back at interest only, but it serves a purpose for us, doesn't it? Because when we run things this way, if we're only paying interest, then that's the only thing we're ever going to pay. And as we put our income in, we satisfy any payment, okay? Even though it does get deducted from the interest to pay that, because the bank's always going to get theirs. But we are still then working down our card with the rest of the cash flow we've made available. All right, so 11,965 minus our income drops us to 79.85. Our expenses of 34.10 come out because remember, these are gone. So if we take 350, subtract it from the 37.60, this is what we're going to get. Now we have interest we have to figure. And it's important that if you guys are running a strategy like this and you're trying to figure out how long it's going to take you to pay off these debts, this is how you would calculate your interest. You are going to take your high balance. All right, so you're going to take that high balance, which is 11,965. I'm going to add it then. So there's 11,965. I'm going to add then 79.85. So 79.85. Okay, so there's 79.85. We hit enter. We get 19.9, what is that, 20? No, 50. And then, can't read upside down or backwards, I should say. Okay, so 1950. Then I'm going to divide that number by 2. Okay, so this is like my average, right? So that's my average. So I get my average, but I have to then figure out what my interest is going to be. So I'm going to multiply by that 13.5%, and that gives me 1346, so 1,346. That is a year's worth of interest. So now to get my monthly interest, I'm going to divide it by 12, and that's where I'm getting my 112. Now, we know that every month we run this strategy, the interest is going to go down. Why is that? Because our income and the expenses that is now cash flow is helping work this down. So we are going to be paying less in interest the following month. See how this is 112, now it's 107. Again, we're taking our high balance and our low balance, we're adding them together, we're dividing by 2, we're multiplying by our interest, and then we're taking that and dividing it by 12, which gives us the 107, okay? So let's recap this. How are we going to figure it out? We start with 11,965. We've rearranged our debts, okay? We still owe them, we're still paying them, but we've rearranged things. And now this 350 becomes cash flow to me, all right? So now I've put I've started out with 11,965, dropped it by my income. I'm down to 79.85, but my expenses come back in. My interest comes back in. So I end the month at 11,507. Now, here I have to perform a check. Am I going in the right direction or the wrong direction? Is 11,507 less than or greater than 11,965? It's less than, so I'm working fine. This is going to work, right? So how do we check it again? We go to month 2. We continue to do the same thing, okay? And now I'm down to 11,044. Is 11,044 greater or less than 11,507? Well, it's less than, so this is working. So this is how I would run my RLOC strategy, right? My revolving line of credit that is a PLOC, a BLOC, or a home equity line of credit. All right, so if you guys run it this way, okay, so let's say we run it this way, how long does it take us? It takes us, let's see here, 17 months, okay, so it's 17 months. And it costs us $1,157. Now, I have just pulled all of the debts that I have. All right, I've pulled all of them. And I've paid, it took me 17 months, and I've paid $1,157 in interest versus $15,699. That is the power of using lines of credit this way, where you're rearranging your expenses, right? You're just rearranging them. That's it. That's why when I found this and brought this to Dan, he thought it was a shell game. He's like, that doesn't work. You're just moving money around. How does that work? Well, it works because of the internal mechanism, the internal way that this is working by bringing those expenses, right? Those payments, you're bringing those payments back to you. as cash flow. And that cash flow you're turning around by putting all of your income in. You're using your income to work it down. Now, I still have buying power. I still have purchasing power because number one, I still have availability on my line. And number two, these credit cards are wiped out. They're at zero balances. So I have purchasing power. No problems, right? This is the beauty of velocity banking. Now, let me show you how you would do this if it was a credit card. They're a little bit different animal. Why are they different? Because again, credit card as a debt destroyer means you put in part of your pay, not all, okay? Same thing, you're running part of your expenses through the card, not all, which means that you're working with a little bit lower dollar amounts to put in as income and run out as expenses. But let's see how this works, okay? So let's say my Chase card, we're going to work it with just an $8,000 limit. So I'm at my max. I can't roll anything into it, okay? So if I can't roll a single thing into it, I can still run a velocity banking strategy. And guess what's going to happen? This $200 here, I don't owe it anymore. So what happens to that $200? I get to stick it right back in my pocket, don't I? Okay, minus the interest, of course. All right, so let's run it. Let's use Chase as our debt destroyer, okay? So now we've got Chase as our debt destroyer. It's at a 27% interest rate. So what that means that I start out with $8,000, I put my available income in, which is $2,180. So how do I figure out what the heck my available income is? Well, remember, I can't use this, I can't use this, I can't use this, and I can't use this. I can use this. I can keep that in my income because I'm using this as my debt destroyer. I don't have to hold it out, right? So how does that look? We have our available income. In this case, we start out with our income, which is $39.80, and we're subtracting off these two from our income. We have to hold those out of our income and put it into our checking account to pay those bills. I can't pay them through my credit card. And then I take out the 100, right? I have to hold out the 100 and I have to hold out the 50 into my checking account. Again, they have to be paid through that checking account because I can't run it through my credit card. So these I have to hold out plus this, all right, which gives me the $2,180. I leave that in my income. The 200 I leave in my income because I know I'm going to be using it, right? I'm going to be using it to work down my card. All right, now we have chargeable expenses. So we have to figure out what is non-chargeable. Well, we already know what's non-chargeable. It's on our board. So we start with our total expenses. You're subtracting off this, right? Your mortgage and your car, which is $1,650. You're subtracting off the 200, you're subtracting off the 100, and you're subtracting off the 50. Why am I subtracting off the 200, the 150, and 50 also? Because no matter what, they're still non-chargeable expenses. They're never chargeable. They're non-chargeable. So we hold those out, okay? So those are held out of our expenses, and we run everything else through our credit card. So that means my chargeable expenses, okay, are $1,760, and that's what I have on the board here, $1,760. The rest is all held into my checking to pay those bills. All right, now my first interest rate here, my first interest is going to be $155. That is a significant difference than the 112, isn't it? Okay, even though it's a lower dollar amount than what I'm starting with. So what is the difference? Well, it's this, right? This versus the, whatever, where do I have it? 13.75. So that's going to make a big difference. All right. So let's run this and let's see. So I have 8,000. I'm going to add my 5,820, right? My 5,820, which gives me 13,820. I then divide that by 2 to get my average, which is 69.10. Then I have to multiply by my interest rate, right? So I have to multiply by my interest rate. That gives me 65, which is a year's worth. And if I divide that by 12, that's going to give me my 155, okay? So that is my first interest that I'm working with. But we know that that's going to drop, right? Every month that's going to drop. So then second month we're at down to 149. So here's what we've got, right? So 8,000 in, 8,000 beginning, we put our available income into it, drops us to 5,820. Our expenses, every expense we can run through that card, we're going to run through the card. So we run our expenses out. So that comes back onto the card, just like the interest comes back onto the card. So that leaves us at 7,735. is 7,735 greater or less than the 8,000? It's less, so it's working, right? So again, my income comes in, drops me to 5,555. Then my expenses come back in, my interest comes back in. I'm at 7464. Is 7464 greater or less than 7735? It's less than, so this is working. Now, there's a couple things you can do. If you have a situation where you're working with just credit cards, like a lot of you are, okay? Let's just say that's all this person did was they ran the chase and used that as their debt destroyer, ran all their expenses through it that they could, held out the rest, paid them out of their checking account. What would it look like then if that's all they did, okay, with Velocity Banking? If that is all they did. So what happens is this takes 19 months. All right, so this takes 19 months and let's see, I calculated this for you. Let's see, 17, I think 80, is it 1781? Yeah, 1781. Okay, so it would cost them $1,781 and it would take 9 months to do. If that is all they did, okay, that means they've significantly wiped out this time period, right? So it took them a little over a year. They've paid $1,781 versus $12,696 just by putting their income in, right? Okay. So let's say then if it's me, right, I'm going to switch to the next card, in this case, probably Discover. So wherever Discover is at that point, then I'm going to go ahead and, pay it from there. Now, because I ran all these numbers, I know how long it takes. So my Discover in 19 months is down to, let's see, it's down to 2618, so 2,618. In that time frame, I have spent 1,308. Okay, so 1,308. Okay, this is Discover. Okay, so that's the interest that I spent on Discovery. So now I have spent 1,781 plus the 1,308 for Discover. Okay, so that's how much I've spent. So if I've done that, okay, and then I have to pick up Discover and pay it at the $2,600, and I use that as my debt destroyer and run all of my expenses through that, in a month or two, I'm even, right? Because I'm getting back my Discover payment then, and I'm getting back, I've already gotten back the Chase payment because that's done. So now I'm adding $300 back into my income, right? So this is going to raise the income that goes onto my Discover card at that point. So if I'm at 2,600 is my balance, I'm only going to put my income maybe a couple months and then I have no interest. I'm just running expenses. So it might cost me another $100 maybe, okay? So now I would have spent the 1,781 plus the 1,308 on Discover while this was running, right? And then maybe only $100 or so to finish out this Discover card, okay? Because then all I'm running is expenses. And guys know from credit cards, if you're paying off your credit card every month and charging it back and paying it off every month, you don't owe interest. So then it works like that, okay? So you're winning then. So if you start with the Discover and then pay that off and then roll it over to, start with the Chase, then roll it over to the Discover, you've paid the 1,781, you're paying the 1,308 while Discover runs, and then you're only paying maybe another $100 in interest, right? Maybe. By then, this one's paid off, so you got to add the 224. So worst case, if you do it piecemeal like that, what would you be looking at? So 1,781 plus the 1,308 from the Discover, right, which is about 3,089. And let's say you let this one go, so you're going to add in the 224, okay? So that equals 3,313, and we figure maybe $100 in interest when you use this as the Discover card, and I think that's probably even high. So if we add another $100 for interest, so you've then spent, to piecemeal it together using Velocity Banking instead of rolling it all together, you spent $3,413 versus $15,699. And how long did you do it? Well, 19 months, right? This is a year and 8 months. So at the very most, it's going to be a year and 8 months, right? At the very most, okay? So this is why we do Velocity Banking, you guys. This is why we do it. Because it saves you a heck of a lot of money just by rearranging how you're running your expenses, okay? So I know this one here, in adding these other ones, I'm just trying to show you what the possibilities are. Again, running each as its individual own piece is only going to cost them what? Maybe $3,500 most, okay, at the most, versus the $15,699. So this is why we do velocity banking, and this is why Dan and I teach it to you, because we know what it's like to be in debt that's got a chokehold on you, right? So when you learn how to do velocity banking, you will never go back to the traditional banking ever again, because you guys see the power of it. You know that it works. I have tons of people out there, sending us messages, letting us know that they're starting velocity banking. They can't believe how great it's working. They can't believe what they've saved already. So I implore you guys, try it. So the secret to wiping out debt is by rearranging those expenses, by just changing where you put your expenses. That's it. That's all it is. Have a great day, you guys, and I will see you in the next video.